Test, 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 test. Test, 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 test. Testing 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Brock Beard from lastcar.info coming at you from the conclusion of the Coca-Cola 600 and an exciting day in racing between Formula One World Championship, the Indianapolis 500, and the Coke 600. We will talk about all three tonight, as well as our usual features on both the Xfinity and the Truck Series races. Let's see. Interest sounded off, so I can sound mic shut. Okay. Is the audio okay? Again, before we got a slight echo. Okay, that's not good. Let me try to, we're going to have to mess with the levels here for a little bit, so got to make sure that's all set up right. Maybe it's the input that is turned up. Let me try to turn that down. See if that works here. Sounds like there are two of you. Okay, we don't want that. We don't want that. I'm going to try to turn this up here. Testing, 1, 2, 3. I think I have it on. Oh, okay. This might be what the problem is here. Let me mute that. That probably. Oh. Echo and pretty quiet. Okay, that's not good either. Super tinny with an echo. Alrighty. This audio equipment is not working the way I wanted it to already. Sounds good? Sounds better? Okay. I think I had two channels open, so that's it. Sounds better? Okay. We'll throw into this here in a bit. It's good now? Loud and clear. Okay, good. That was a big thing. I wanted okay, there we go. Let me make sure it's not too loud. Alrighty. If it gets too loud, no overlap, you sound louder too. Okay, good. That was the thing. I recently picked up a new piece of audio equipment here. I got one of those Wave XLR deals because I noticed, on our shows a while back, it was too quiet. And I also want to have the microphone off screen here so it looks a little better. Audio's good now? Okay, good. No more overlap. Okay, I'll just keep that other channel quiet. I think that's where that was coming from. All right. Excellent. Okay. Yeah. Any other issues? Yeah. If it's starting to hurt your guys' ears or something, don't be afraid to tell me here, and we'll get into that. And we'll go ahead and sense. I see the levels are a lot higher than it was on the old system here, so I'm very happy with that so far. Okay. Excellent. So let's go into the first part of it here. First things first, I got to say, I know that Denny Hamlin may not be the most exciting winner to cap off such a crazy day, but I think there are so many positives to really glean from the racing itself. I think Formula One, the IndyCar race, and the Charlotte race tonight, I think had some fantastic racing. Things are not perfect. We'll get into that certainly. Chris Buescher's accident is definitely one thing to talk about, and the overall quality of the broadcast on the NASCAR side was certainly an issue this weekend, but that'll come up as we go along here. But I think one thing that immediately comes to mind is this is absolutely the craziest 600 that I've seen. I can't even remember how long. I think about the era with the levigated races. I know that got brought up a lot on social media. Certainly back in 2005, you had a time where the track had just been ground down. You had a lot of tire failures. You had a lot of wrecks, and ultimately a photo finish between Jimmy Johnson and Bobby Labonte. This was easily the craziest one I've seen since then. And while on one hand, I don't think you need to have a whole lot of crashes to have the racing be great. I thought we saw some really good competition throughout. It was very easy to stay engaged with this one. And not just battles for the lead. I mean, the fact that we didn't really have a dominant driver throughout this. Anybody who seemed to be close to dominating was going to have problems at one point or another and try to get back up there. And unfortunately, we did have the bigger accidents towards the end of the Cup Series race, which of course is unfortunate. But it was a result of some absolutely daring moves. I never thought I would see a 4-wide attempt for the lead off of turn 4 at Charlotte. These are things I didn't think would be possible at all. But I got to say, I mean, fantastic racing out of this package. I don't know what it is with this next-gen car and these mile-and-a-half tracks. I know that there was a lot of trepidation coming to this race, and I certainly had it coming into it. After the All-Star race at Texas being as lame as it was, of course, you had a wreck that eliminated, the top drivers, that Ross Chastain and Kyle Busch seemed to have the best cars. Nobody seemed to have any indication that they could actually get around and actually try to get the lead. And then Ryan Blaney dominates the entire end of it. And then you had the whole safety issue on top of it with the window net deal and the caution from there. This was very different from that. I mean, obviously, you still had several overtimes. I think it was 413 laps in the final running order, which is pretty crazy if you really think about it. And also the level of competition, but it seemed like all positions, were really interesting to see. And again, but I think that this kind of hits on the first problem, and I mentioned this at the very end of the race here with the broadcasting. There was so much racing that I think they didn't adjust their traditional approach to the camera direction to accommodate showing as much of this as possible. I think, I know I was getting some criticism on this already before I started the show here, but again, I think there were some great races at the back of the pack. People like Kaz Gralla getting back up in the mix, even though they were, you had other drivers like Cody Ware and BJ McLeod, even though they were well off the lead lap, not being factors for the win necessarily, but just straight up surviving to get back into the mix of this thing. It seemed like in the background you could kind of see some people setting up some moves, but you just couldn't see it. And of course, the wind is the most critical part of it. But couldn't they pick some other camera angles so you could see both, or at least see some of it? I think it was just it was if there was some better camera direction, I think this race would have really, really kind of, stuck with people even more. I think it's already got great rewatch value. I think some of the moves that we saw were great. Austin Dillon's move, for example, when he had the 4 fresh tires and he's coming along on the inside, they show the replay and Clint Boyer's like, look at Dillon set up this pass, but we can't see it because we're only seeing the top 2 drivers. And then all of a sudden Dillon comes off stage right here and he's just completely out of nowhere. You don't know how he set that up. Again, I think that's another good illustration of it there. But again, I don't want to distract that too much from, the quality of the racing that we had today, at the same time though. And yeah, while there were a lot of wrecks, one thing that you certainly can't say about this one here is we didn't have a situation where drivers were able to come back from situations. It seemed like the biggest problem that any of these drivers would face, and this was certainly critical in the Chris Buescher accident, was the failure of the toe link in the suspension of these cars. I think this is not a new problem. We have seen this over and over again in the last few races here, but it's been a particular problem, and you just have any kind of incident where one corner of the car hits the outside wall or something of that nature. We had the same problem that seemed to kind of come up over and over again there. Certainly in Chris Buescher's accident, this had the most catastrophic result of the entire suspension of the, I believe it was the right front of that car after just a very solid hit with Suarez there, knocking that suspension loose and the entire assembly dangling from the tether. And then when the car is sliding on that flat bottom across the grass, and suddenly that thing kind of comes down and gets between the bodywork and the car, it just springs right off of it. And that turned out to be very much the situation there. Good to see Chris Buescher walk away from that accident, certainly. But again, I think it really points to what has been a constant problem with this car in this first part of the season, that these suspension parts are relatively fragile. They're not as durable as the rest of the car. And I think when you have this kind of close racing where people can bounce off each other all the time, the weakest link in that chain is going to be the one that's going to fail. And perhaps NASCAR couldn't anticipate this before the start of the season, but I think we have more than enough evidence to look at it at this point here. I applaud Larry McReynolds for breaking it down during the race and showing that basically you just have like one bolt on this thing. And, again, you have a situation like, back at Daytona where you have a multi-car accident. Somebody's still able to drive the car, but all the wheels are pointing in different directions because those links just snap off. So, it's a different kind of situation there. But again, hopefully it's something that, again, we kind of narrow down what the problems are. It seems like back in NASCAR's early history, one of the first problems they had to solve was axles getting ripped out of these cars on the dirt tracks. So it was kind of a different situation there too. But I think that's another thing to look at. But I think it's, fortunately something that I guess the teams can kind of work around as best they can. Although the close racing that we saw in this one, certainly unlikely to change. But again, I'm going to be interested to see how that handles at Sears Point and some of these other tracks coming up here. But I think that's another thing to kind of look at here at the same time. But my goodness, I don't even know where to start here. Kyle Larson, there's one of you guys I know was tweeting during the race there and mentioning that, look, Kyle Larson's going to win this race. The fact that he had so many problems in this race. Talking about people that were trying to come back from the back of the pack, nobody dealing with more problems in this race than Larson, to the point where in the first half of the race, he said it was the worst race of his life, dealing with a car that wasn't handling very well. He had a practice incident that prevented him from qualifying, so he had to start in the back, get a tail end penalty on top of it. then all these same problems on pit road with wheels rolling away and penalties from there. And Cliff Daniels very eloquently and in his trademark deadpan style there, mentioning that they even had the car catch on fire. Luckily, not seriously, but in such a way that it's like, that car had just been through everything. And I know, obviously, the Larson fans out there would have really enjoyed if that ended up being made into a diecast of just a car just been through hell and pulling off an actual victory, or unfortunately not the situation for him. But not for lack of trying. I think in a race like this, and I mentioned this with Cole Custer on here, who was another figure that really stood out in this. What's unfortunate is when you look at a race results of this, a few weeks, few months, or even a few years down the road, it's going to be very hard to remember just all the other drivers that really played a factor in this. The fact that both Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez had probably the best overall team performance for Team Trackhouse in a year where Suarez has just been utterly dominant, or not Suarez, but Chastain has been utterly dominant on this, getting his 2 wins, 2-win club that now William Byron and now Denny Hamlin are joining. But Suarez coming very close to pulling off the victory. It looked like it was going to be a day for Mexico between Sergio Perez's win in the Formula One race and then almost having Pato O'Ward pull off the Indy 500. Suarez was picking up right where he left off, had a fantastic car in the first half of the race, was still a part of the mix, seemed to be missing all the accidents, and then unfortunately some contact from Chase Briscoe sent him into traffic, and you had that very serious accident there with Chris Buescher that resulted from it. But again, I think Suarez is right there now, I would say, with Tyler Reddick in terms of being the next driver that is a real legitimate shot of pulling off their first victory. Reddick himself leading a number of laps in this one and really kind of showing his strength on this, finishing 6th in the running order. A couple of guys mentioning, of course, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and getting his top 10 streak to continue. Looked like he had a shot at a possible win, but the old tires just didn't work out there with the multiple restarts. Lost some spots on the first one and then was able to hang on to 7th on the other. One of many other great runs by drivers here that just, again, much like the 2005 race, teams that were able to just survive and get the best runs that they could under the circumstances. Michael McDowell finishing in the 8th spot. His teammate Todd Gilliland was with him for portions of this. Ended up falling back to the last car in the lead lap in the 16th spot. Eric Jones framed the car off the outside wall. Still got a 14th place showing. Ross Chastain, after the aforementioned damage in one of the other wrecks. Larger pileups. Again, can't remember last time you saw a large pileup at Charlotte. Can't remember last time you had a flip at Charlotte. And then you end up having both in here. And again, fortunately, nothing serious in terms of injuries here. But the Petty GMS cars, 13th and 14th, Ty Dillon ahead of Eric Jones. Good for them. The broadcast mentioning that Ty Dillon was the only driver on the lead lap still running that hadn't been involved in at least one of these incidents. So great for him. Kyle Larson still salvaged a 9th place run. Had to fight off Chase Briscoe. Briscoe returning to the exact same thing that we saw back at the Bristol Dirt Race when he was battling Tyler Reddick on the final lap. Once again, did another dive bomb under Larson and had a great 2-car battle there for a bit. Unfortunately, the car just came unglued, and like so many incidents that we saw in this race, the single car incident was kind of reigning supreme on this and racking up the cautions. Single car spins off turn 4 in particular, a few off turn 2. Briscoe getting involved in this one and still recovered to get a 4th place finish there. Kevin Harvick, didn't really hear much out of him today. I mean, he slapped the outside wall after skating up the track, finishing in the 3rd spot. Kyle Busch mentioned in his post-race interview he didn't really expect his car to be very good in this race given the struggles they had for most of this. He gets a runner-up finish by 119 thousandths of a second. It's a lot of positive runs here for a lot of teams that needed it. But at the same time, of course, when that usually happens, you're going to have a lot of drivers that are going to be very unhappy at the same time. That certainly was the case at the end. But I think a lot of drivers, even the ones that were involved in these incidents, really distinguished themselves by having the best runs that they could. And unfortunately, a lot of the trouble did end up ultimately happening at the front of the pack there. Joey Logano, again, getting involved in one of those incidents then towards the end. Cole Custer's run, having not getting a top 10 in more than a year. The Kentucky winner from 2020 ends up 21st in the running order. And it's unfortunate because that guy seemed determined to get a top 5 finish out there, perhaps even beating all of his Stewart-Haas teammates who were having their own particular problems. He seemed to keep that 41 car clean, but unfortunately back in the order there and looking towards Gateway to try to build that momentum back up again. Kaz Grala and the money team, the only open team that was actually entered in this race, showed up in the top 16 when they were determining the starting order. They kept the lineup there for quite a bit. But he ends up, I think that might have been a miscalculation because it shows him 13 laps down here at the end of this, the 23rd spot. But still, good to see him at least figured in somehow at the results here, dropping back at the end of this there. I don't know if that was some kind of a scoring issue or graphics issue, but it surprised me. I saw the 50 show up on there. I'm like, wow, I didn't think he was even anywhere near the lead lap. But obviously some of these other contenders that climbed their way up there. BJ McLeod was 6 laps down, gets 19th. And Cody Ware improving on his, I believe it's very close to his best Cup finish, if not his best overall, finishing in the 18th spot there for him. I got to look at that one too, making sure I get that at the same time here. But again, many big pileups there during the race. So again, I digress again. It's not really having a whole lot of wrecks that are a part of it. I think a lot of these wrecks were a situation where you had single car incidents where people just were breaking loose all over the place. And how many Charlotte races have we seen where it almost plays out like a traditional Dover race, where you have an accident that's in the very early stages of the event, and then you're going to have like kind of clean and green from there. Everybody gets kind of strung out. The field just kind of separates and nobody can really get a chance at competing for the win. In this particular case, it seemed like there were battles all the way through the field. I think Fox would have been better to show like a multi-screen thing and show kind of what they used to do back at Daytona not too many years ago, where they just show like there's racing all over the track. I think this was a race that you could absolutely say that. I'll be curious to hear what DNF Racers thinks about that because, again, he did a great job providing some pictures from the Speedway this weekend in all 3 of the series, and big thanks to him. Been able to, he actually just sent over some more pictures from the Ryan Prix incident there today in the 600. Again, Priest's incident, capturing, again, the same situation there. It seemed like it was a very minor incident, an incident that, in fact, Chris Buescher and Noah Gragson were able to recover from. But the minor contact that apparently Priest had and just these 2 cars spinning down the track was enough to actually knock them out of the race. They were on the 6-minute crash clock when the 15 came down pit road, and they were trying to get those repairs completed. And the broadcasters were right in saying that, look, it doesn't look like it's that serious. They should be able to get back out there. They never really kind of followed up on that story. I don't expect them to always do that with last place battles there. I think it's very easy to kind of dismiss that and maybe mention it afterwards. But at the same time, it was interesting kind of hearing it over the radio that they were trying to attempt these repairs, and basically they just, it took several laps and they just ran out of time and they had to basically just drive the car behind the wall and they were done. Rather anticlimactic weekend ending to what had been a rather tumultuous weekend for Prix, who was not far from the storylines at all between the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series races as well. And we'll certainly talk about that at the same time. Just pulling up Cody Ware's statistics here, his previous best, actually his 17th place finish at the Daytona 500 this year, still stands as his best, finishing in the 18th spot tonight here in the 600. His best run on a non-super speedway. So again, that still stands out on that in that respect there too. But Ryan Prix, uncontested for last place there. Actually lists him out under the DVP instead of a crash, which is interesting. Usually they don't show a driver, again, falling out because of the DVP unless they attempt to get back out on the track and don't reach minimum speed. There were no indications, at least from what I heard from DNF racers, that he ever returned to the track. That just ran out of time actually trying to fix those repairs. So kind of interesting how that shook out. But Josh Bilicki and Corey LaJoie, I mean, again, on the wrong side of everything this weekend. Spire Motorsports having a frustrating weekend. They had Landon Castle, had a big hit in Texas last week in the All-Star Open. They come back with Josh Bilicki and Corey LaJoie, excuse me. Long day, but as I'm sure you guys can attest to. Corey LaJoie has a wreck in practice. Smashes up a car there. They had to go to a backup. The team spent until 7 o'clock this very morning to get him back out there. And unfortunately, to get involved in another incident, pounds the wall back down and ends up finishing in the 35th spot. Josh Bilicki, his teammate, had contact with the outside wall. Fox did not show it in the broadcast. But again, there were some great pictures that were captured by some of the media that was at the track there. Kudos to them for sharing that there, showing the 77 car bounced off the wall, finished in 36th. Austin Cindric was at a much higher speed during his accident that happened in turn 3. Good to see him be able to get out of that car okay, but a very hard hit backing into the outside wall, finishing 34th. And Chase Elliott rounding out the bottom 5, listed under the DVP, led 86 laps of this race before he ultimately ended up in the bottom 5, showing once again that really whoever finishes at the back of the field is not absolutely a certainty anymore. You can have a situation where you can have drivers that drop out of contention just as easily as any other time there. So that was a situation with Elliott and many other contenders. The biggest accident, at least in terms of car count, was that one in turn 1 with Ryan Blaney getting spun out of about the 6th position. And again, just another situation where a driver just has a hard time hanging on to it. And I wouldn't have thought of Charlotte as being the loosest track out there. But I guess warm weather or wind or some combination of it, and certainly this new car on top of it, led to a pretty wild event. I don't know if we can expect this in every race, but I think that there's certainly a learning curve that a lot of these teams are going to be figuring out. I would be very interested to see if this transitions over to the concrete mile and a half at Nashville, which was, I think, I kind of remembered, felt like kind of a placid race last year, except for the first lap incident that Quinn Houff was involved in. But we'll see what happens on that. I think that's going to be very interesting. But lots of drivers involved in that one there. Ryan Blaney, Brad Keselowski, Kurt Busch, William Byron, Chase Elliott eliminated. Bubba Wallace cleared the crash clock, but it still shows him out under the DVP just a few laps later. Justin Haley blows an engine. He'd been nursing an engine for a long time there. The Colleague team, it just seems like they're trying to get to a situation where they could get both their cars in contention here. Every once in a while we see the 31 car up there, or the 16. It seems like they can't quite get to that point. We've seen Petty GMS be able to do it with the 42 and the 43, and even tonight with the 34 and the 38 over at front row. Hopefully the Colleague effort, they certainly have the support and the talent there. They just need the luck to kind of get back to that point. But hopefully we'll find out if that's going to be the case going forward here. But congratulations to Denny Hamlin on the win. Looking back again at some other drivers that kind of stand out here in the lineup, Harrison Burton has had an absolutely rough season this year, driving for the Wood Brothers. I am by no means the first person to say that, but finishing in the 11th spot there, I think is a good shot in the arm, no matter how you can get it. I know you can say a lot about, a driver being involved in any number of incidents that's going to bring them back into contention. But again, you got to finish the race to be a factor here. And I think a lot of these drivers will take these runs wherever they can get them. But again, a lot of drivers that I think, were impressive. Even Bubba Wallace, with mentioning his DVP there too. The fact that he was one of those many drivers that spun out off turn 4, and I think showed the right presence of mind. Perhaps him and his spotter to kind of just drive back onto pit road, and his pit stall was very close by, and really minimize the damage at that time, to the point that unfortunately he was still involved in that later accident, but he still had to be there. Ross Chastain, again, both the Trackhouse guys just as strong as ever. The results don't show it, with Chastain in 15th, and Suarez, of course, in the Buescher accident, finishing in 25th. But again, I think they're just going to be as bad to the bone as ever. We go to Gateway next week, and I don't think it was any coincidence that they put Ross Chastain in the ad for the first Cup race there, knowing that Chastain, despite the botched Vince Welch call, scored one of the most important victories in his recent career before his Cup ride, when he won with Al Neese's team, bouncing back from that disqualification at Iowa to win at Gateway a couple years ago, when it was splitting with his Cup ride at Prima Motorsports at Sears Point that same weekend. So again, really came out on top on that and pulling off that victory. I'm sure he's very much looking forward to making a return to this, and perhaps regaining the point lead here, that he now has a situation here where he's now tied, at least in terms of victories, with both Denny Hamlin and William Byron here, going through the first third of the season and now entering the summer stretch here. Christopher Bell, very impressed to see him bounce back into the 5th spot. Lost a lap there after one of the many incidents with flat tires and spins during this. But again, I think that it was a crazy race. It was a competitive race. We saw a lot of comers and goers, and we saw a lot of endurance. I think we saw a lot of character building out of a lot of these drivers in the Cup race here. And, I haven't watched a lot of the post-race show, but that seemed to be the situation there too. I think there's certainly drivers that are happy with, pulling off the runs that they could get. Denny was certainly, happy, of course, with the win there, given the fact that he never won the Coke 600 before, which I thought was rather surprising. given his veteran status. It seemed like that had been a win that he had knocked off his list very early, especially since he was still running when we had 500-mile races at Pocono, and he seemed capable of winning very long-distance races. And of course, many-time winner of the Daytona 500 at this point, and other races there. But again, great run for him there. I think that there's a lot of positives to glean from that. Again, very physical race. I think it's another endorsement of the car from a competitive standpoint. But I do think, yes, I think there needs to be something that's looked at with this tie rod issue. I think that I keep saying that the issue with the toe end on that. I think that when you have these very, very small rods that are not secured very well, and when that wheel flops around, I mean, it's one thing if the wheel just kind of caves into the car and the car just kind of grinds to a stop on the track. We've seen plenty of that this year. But when there's a situation of the entire assembly dangling from the car, that is still definitely a safety concern. The kind of thing you wouldn't typically see from races with the Gen 6 car earlier. If anything happened with the wheel, it would just completely fly off. It wouldn't just still, I mean, there would be wheel tethers, but you wouldn't see the wheel tether be actually a factor in the accident. I guess you could say, really, from that standpoint, this is just a right chain of circumstances. If the car landed a different direction, maybe it wouldn't have dug in. If it lost a little bit more speed, maybe it wouldn't have dug in. And again, yeah, I thought, like a lot of other people did on social media here, that the turf had something to do with it. I'm thinking like, okay, well maybe, and a lot of you guys mentioning the manhole covers too. I think there were a couple of you mentioning that. It's certainly, nothing is ruled out. You think of Carl Edwards' spin through the grass after he won the All-Star race, I think in 2011, and just completely ripped the nose of his car off there. I think Jimmy Johnson came very close to doing the same thing. Well, he did that at Daytona, but I think he did it at Charlotte too, because he's won the All-Star race however many times in his own career. Yeah, I think that's another one to kind of look at there at the same time. Yeah, again, I think in terms of safety issues, I think that is still something to kind of check out. But yeah, it was a chaotic race. I think it's definitely gonna be something that NASCAR is gonna be using in their promotional materials for the near future here. Between Austin Dillon's dive bomb and the many wrecks from it, I mean, they're gonna show that for every race probably for the rest of this. Well, they only got a couple more races till NBC takes over, so yeah, I think from that point they're really gonna ramp it up to kind of close out their season from Gateway and Sears Point here the next couple weeks. But again, as with any race that plays out like this, I hope it's not typical that we have quite this many crashes. But again, I'm not against entirely having a lot of attrition in a race either. I think we are seeing the mechanical limits of these cars. I think there is a limit to how much you could thrash these cars. That's absolutely been made clear by today's race. And with every race being shorter than this, of course, maybe we won't see this play out exactly the same way. I think the ultimate test still remains. We got that Texas race coming up in the playoffs. Are these cars going to have the same exact problems they had in the All-Star race, or is that going to work out better on a longer distance run? I'm not sure. It seemed like Ryan Blaney was able to be pretty much unheaded for the lead during that entire competition, where it's just for money and not for points. So if nobody else is able to catch him, I don't know. But it certainly also augurs, of course, for people that want to get the All-Star race back to Charlotte. I think this is definitely another feather in their cap as well, and I don't blame them. I think this is definitely a good case for it. I know that looking at other tracks is one thing they're looking at doing, but of course there's a limitation with the SMI portion of the schedule, which is why they did Bristol and why they've since done Texas. That's also, I think, the legacy of the Francis Furco thing by getting the 2 dates for Texas. And if they're not 2 points races, then is it going to be the All-Star race? There's a lot of, red tape, I think, that's going to have to be undone before it goes anywhere else. But maybe a good compromise would be bringing it back to Charlotte. And again, like I say with, the playoff system and everything, just call it the All-Star Classic. And you're bringing it back to a venue that it's always been at and kind of going back to it in that standpoint. I think that's another one to certainly talk about. So talking about Jimmy Johnson earlier, I know we usually just talk about the Cup Series, Xfinity, and the Truck Series, but I certainly don't want to overlook anything from the rest of today here, too, because I think we just had incredible racing from all this. Now, I will qualify this, of course, that I am not by any means a practice expert in Formula One, in IndyCar, IndyCar, but particularly Formula One. Anything in open wheel racing, I'm very much a novice with that. I talked about my background with IndyCar racing a bit and until lap 11. But certainly the Indy 500, over the last decade, I think, has produced some of the most tremendous racing we've seen. And again, as much as a hardcore NASCAR fan as I am, I will still acknowledge that there's only one greatest spectacle in racing, and that is the Indy 500. So, tremendous race out there. Our William Saki, staff writer at LastCar.info, is there as one of the fans in the stands there. I hope you had a tremendous time out there. So, William, if you're checking this out, man, I hope you had a great time out there. I enjoyed doing the bit of the last place coverage there, tracking that. They actually had a pretty decent competition at the back of the field. I was kind of reminded of the old super speedway package from the early 2000s in NASCAR, where you just had a large pack of cars, and it seemed like even the back of the field wasn't able to be that much further behind anybody else. The draft was just so strong. The last few years, I think, especially since the DW12 was introduced, has really created a new golden age in the history of the Indy 500. And I know some people are saying like Will Powers win a couple of years ago was boring. I didn't think so. I thought it was great when Stephen Wilson was trying to stay out there and stretch his fuel as long as possible. Yeah, you could say he never really had a shot at it, but he was going for it and running as many laps as he could. And maybe if things played out a little differently, it would have been a different result for him. And then, Takuma Sato, I think, certainly in today's race, was really showing that he's as much of a one-man show as he's ever been. Lastbro in particular is a huge fan of his there. So the no attack, no chance there, I think is very fitting of him, certainly in that case too. But congratulations to Marcus Ericsson on a tremendous victory in the Indy 500 today. Very well fought, very well earned. I know there's already a lot of controversy and people talking about the race being red flagged to guarantee a finish at the end of it. Of course, the IndyCar series doesn't have any green, white, checkered rules. Certainly not one as ingrained in NASCAR like we have over there. But in IndyCar, again, I think under the circumstances, we just had a tremendous finish. If you have another incident, which we did in this case with Sage Karam's wreck on the back straightaway, you can't fault them for at least trying for it. And I think 6 laps is just on the outside of it. It's like if you can clean up one car in that particular time, it should be okay. But I think, I'm glad that they had at least a shot to compete for it under the circumstances. I'm always going to be, somebody that's supporting a green flag finish because I think ultimately that's what the fans in the stands are paying for. And that does play a role. I know it kind of flirts with that line between sports and entertainment. But again, the race is entirely about, the race to the finish. Sometimes it ends under caution. I think Tony Kanaan's win in 2013 was very dramatic. I'm glad he was able to run a slower lap there and be able to enjoy it, much like Dale Earnhardt did with his first Daytona 500 win in 1998. But again, I can see both sides of it here at the same time. I think, you had a situation here where you had Pato O'Ward there in second place, and he seemed to have, even though the handle was kind of going away on his car, seemed like he had a really good shot at actually making something happen. And indeed did get a good bid on him in turn 1 that ultimately didn't work. And at that point, Marcus Ericsson, caution or none, looked like he had that one very well in hand, and then the race ended at that point. I think anything beyond that would have been just utter chaos. But very pleased with the competition of that. I thought it was a thrilling race, beautiful weather, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. You gotta feel for Scott Dixon after what happened there, in the late stages of that. Flashing back to Juan Pablo Montoya at the Brickyard 400 in 2009. Very same situation with the very same team. Dominating the race, looked like he was going to win it. But again, there are no sure things at Indianapolis. I may not be the most knowledgeable guy when it comes to IndyCar racing, but I know that much for sure. You think about Michael Andretti crushing the field there and not being able to pull it off. You think of all these other circumstances where drivers just can't quite get to the finish line and the situation's playing out the way they can. And it's happened to the greatest. And Scott Dixon is certainly one of those, if not the greatest driver that is still active full-time in IndyCar. It's unbelievable to think of the fact that he's only won it the one time in 2008. But famously, of course, Mario Andretti only won it the one time, and Michael never did. And Marco is still searching for his first win in it. It's really a strong measure of remarkable driving, but it's also a ruthless reality there for a lot of these different teams too. So yeah, the fans were cheering when the red came out. I mean, I don't blame them. Again, I think if you're waiting for this the entire year, this singular event, and it's beautiful weather, and you've been waiting all these lines, and you're sitting in the sun, and you're just anticipating that. I mean, at least give them a shot at the finish there. But of course, the other side of it too is, of course, what brought out the caution. And this again brings us back to Jimmy Johnson and the Carvana team. Johnson, I thought, did a very fine job out there. He was trying to run conservatively at the beginning, trying to make a push at the end. I thought really when it came down to the end, he was maybe going to try something on fuel mileage. It really looked like it was going to be a situation where he was going to be able to kind of stretch his fuel and become more competitive at the end of it there. And he was kind of working his way up there. It didn't quite work out. He had to make a late race pit stop that pretty much took him out of contention even before his accident. And then at that point, I'm sure his goal was to at least finish the race. Came very close to that. But unfortunately, the second turn in this race was just so treacherous that whatever the combination, much like a little bit we saw in the 600 for sure, just a combination of wind direction or heat or whatever was going on there, unfortunately took him out of the race. Glad he was able to walk out of the car okay. I hope he makes another try at it there. I think it's something that certainly, given his pedigree with NASCAR as a 7-time champion and, of course, his driver who so regularly won the Brickyard 400, I think it would be great to see him make another bid at it. I think it was a great learning experience for him, and I think there's a lot of positives he can glean from it, despite the unfortunate result there at the finish. Whoop, I'm gesticulating so much, I'm knocking my mouse off there. Okay. But I want to kind of look at the rest of the results here and kind of look at what we had here from that race. Rinus VeeKay, being your last place finisher of this race, had an absolutely tremendous hot rod there for Ed Carpenter Racing. Seemed like he was going to be an absolute threat. I believe David Land's starting grid mentioned that he had like one of the fastest laps of the entire week. But an unfortunate situation there, dropping him out. One of the first of many single car accidents. But again, refreshingly, not any multi-car accidents in this race. At most, one car bouncing off one wall and hitting the other. I thought very clean racing that we didn't see anything too crazy in that sense. But the competition just remained as tight as ever. Scott McLaughlin, I thought, was very impressive. I think that it'd be good to see him be able to improve on that, of course. Especially with, of course, Roger Penske owning the track. I'm sure he was very partial to any new talent that's able to get that car back up there. Ed Carpenter was my fantasy pick for it. I thought he was going to have a better showing there. It seemed like he was able to stay in the top 10, but just gradually just lost more and more spots, and then just ultimately finished back in the 19th spot there at the end of the race, which is too bad. I still hold out hope he's going to drink the buttermilk one of these days, but unfortunately today was not that day. But still a fine showing out of him from there. Simon Pagenaud and Elio Castroneves, the Meyer-Shank team there, finishing in the 7th and 8th spot. Alex Palau, the other driver that seemed to really have a good shot at it from the Chip Ganassi Racing stables there. He and Dixon seemed like they were just destined to just kind of trade the lead for the entire distance. Both of them having separate issues at different points of the race there to drop them from contention. Palau ultimately climbing back to finish 9th at the finish. Santino Ferrucci, I really liked the tinted limo visor on the front of his car. I didn't notice that until the race itself. I didn't watch much of the practice. But I was very impressed with the very menacing look that they gave his car, especially running a black paint scheme. I thought that kind of suited him there in that sense, especially when he was making pretty aggressive moves out there. Still getting a top 10 finish out of that. Santino, of course, has been running in the Xfinity Series part-time with Sam Hunt Racing. I don't think he has this year, but he did through last year. Had some good runs out there and getting, I think he had a streak of like top 15s or top 20s last year, and it seemed like that was something that was coming up in our entry list features from one week to the next. But that was certainly good to see. Alexander Rossi was kind of charged up there. Connor Daly always being a factor in this too. I thought that was really really good to see there also. And Tony Kanaan, mentioning him, of course, winning in 2013. This one here, probably one of his best runs that he's had since then. Although he had that really good run with Ganassi a couple of years ago. But this time around, in Ganassi's number one car there, it really looked like he was going to be in position to do something. I love the defensive maneuvers he had to try to make sure he held on to his podium position there at the end of it. But again, Marcus Ericsson, they just talked about Marcus very briefly at the very early stages there, and he was kind of flying under the radar, and those are kind of stories that are interesting. But again, bringing the number 8 back to victory lane, tremendous. And again, still with Ganassi there, and still leaving the track there with a victory there, despite the crushing disappointment that both of his teammates had. But again, I think we saw the highest of highs and the lowest of lows on that. But thankfully, a safe race as well, and a well broadcast race. I think that there was good broadcasting from Lee Diffie and the rest of the group there. I thought James Hinchcliffe did a solid job there in the booth as well to kind of balance the rest of the crew at the same time. I know it seemed like it was still too many cooks in the kitchen there. I don't think it needed a whole second booth there with Dale Jr. and Danica Patrick and so forth there. And it was, I don't know. I mean, I know if they always feel like they have to have that format there, but it felt like they didn't have as much to do. And then Rutledge Wood just doing the man in the stands thing. I know there's some people who just love those segments, so I guess I can't speak for them. But I always think that's just kind of unnecessary. So, but that's just the way it plays out. I mean, everybody's got their place in this, and he seems happy doing that. So I guess that's all you can say on that end there, too. Also, I saw this come up in the comments here earlier. I think it was, what was it? Was it you, Judo Joker? Mentioning Jamie Mack for full time in the booth. Yes, going back to the Cup race again today, I thought he did a really excellent job there in the booth. I thought he did a fine job breaking it down. I think he has a more measured, kind of methodical tone. I think what this booth needs is kind of that Ned Jarrett kind of presence, where it's somebody that even if they kind of speak up, or get excited, it's still kind of it's not above a certain clear threshold. That was one great thing with Ned Jarrett. Like, even when he was excited, like when calling his son home, like that was like as high as he got on that in terms of like decibel level or, enthusiasm there. He most often would kind of keep like a steady level there to kind of offset Benny Parsons being the more boisterous one in the ESPN group. I think bringing Jamie McMurray in there to offset Clint Boyer is a great idea. And yeah, I'd be A-okay with him being full-time in the booth and having, again, another recent driver that has that view. Because I think Clint Boyer has a very surface-level analysis with the sport, and he's just kind of there to kind of react to things that happen or make jokes and crack wise and all that, and that's fine. But I think you still need to have somebody that's going to be providing a lot of the information there. And I think that was a decent job there with that. I thought he was not at all distracting, I felt, from the broadcast. I think he didn't goof around a whole lot like you usually see in the Xfinity broadcasts. But I think that was another positive to really glean from that too. I guess I could talk about the Formula One race here as well. And again, this is something I'm not going to stay on for too long because, again, it's something that's well outside my experience. But I'll definitely mention it here because I think it's worth mentioning with of course, the history of all three of these legendary events here, of course. Sergio Perez, very popular victory. Again, it seems like it was going to be the start of something, maybe for these different drivers hailing from Mexico to be a factor. And really, all three of them were factors in each of these races today. Perez being the only one that broke through there over Carlos Sainz. Again, the battle at the back of the field was not quite as clear there. They didn't seem to really show when Kevin Magnussen dropped out, but he saw his reaction after Mick Schumacher had that very scary accident exiting the chicane there by the marina. That was rather shocking. Certainly seeing the back end of the car break off makes you think back of Roman Grosjean's accident from just recently. Glad that it wasn't anything more serious than that. And again, I think that, that's definitely another thing to kind of look at there at the same time. Now, what certainly came up in this race, and I know that I was going to say Jackie Stewart, but not him. David Hobbs was bringing up. And before that, of course, you had, really showing my lack of knowledge on this here, too. The pit road reporter there, Martin Brundle as well, bringing up. Right from the outset, I thought what was very strange about that race was that you got this rain that's coming in, and it's not like Formula One has never raced in the rain before. And I've heard about that race at Spa last year where they basically kind of started and stopped and barely did a race at all, gave everybody, what, a fraction of a point, and then just ended the race. And people not being happy about that. And Spa, of course, being as dangerous of a track already, I think that was forcing their hand. But a track that's much slower, like Monaco, I think it was a little bit of an overreaction from a lot of the measures they were taking. I think they were a little bit too careful in this. Now, again, this is coming from the standpoint of somebody that's, from what I'm saying here versus, of course, what David Hobbs or Martin Rundle would say. I tend to agree with them, at least what I'm seeing here at the same time, because it's like, look, it's not as fast of a track. You're not going to have the same kind of concerns as you would on there. Excuse me. But yeah, I think it was a different. If you have rain tires, I think it would have been very interesting. And I thought they seemed to be handling it at least in somewhat a way that seemed to have some logic to it at first, where you're going to have the race start at the top of the hour, and then when it gets to that time, they're like, okay, well, we're going to give you a few more minutes and let you put on rain tires. And then I think everybody expected, well, okay, we're going to go ahead and start, And then you see some more weather is coming in, and these cells were kind of popping up randomly from the west, but it was going to keep going. There wasn't any indication it was going to stop. And even with all the computers and technology that they had on that, that seemed to be kind of the situation there too. But yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of the. It would have been interesting if they just started the race, and I think that was kind of where everybody was feeling. And what frustrated me a bit was in the broadcast booth, it seemed like they were just nobody knew what was going on, like at all, and they didn't have like that Pereira guy in the NFL broadcast where they could talk to the rules analyst and say, hey, what's the rule to this? Why are they doing this? Or like in NASCAR, where you have Bob Pockris tweeting something and they'll be like, oh, they're doing it because of this. They didn't seem to have that guy or that resource. And I imagine, I guess in Formula One, it's much harder to get that information, or maybe it's much more hands off, or whatever the situation is. But I found it really frustrating to watch this broadcast, and you got all this material and all these resources and all this technology, and nobody can tell what the hell is going on. It's like, why are they doing this? And I'm like, you're asking me? I'm gonna ask you. Why is this happening? Why are they doing it this way? I mean, they just have, like, then something else will pop up on the screen saying like, oh, we're gonna start in 10 minutes. It's like, okay, well, why are they doing that? I mean, it's just this constant speculation. And the question was asked during the same discussion. It's like, okay, well, how is that different from NASCAR, where of course there could be different rule situations, and you kind of get a situation where you don't know what's happening, and NASCAR broadcaster will kind of brush it off. I think that's kind of the difference. I don't think there's any inquisitiveness when it comes to a rules situation. They just kind of just say, oh, this is what it is, and then they just kind of move on. I think that's very different. In Formula One, I'm glad they were asking the questions, but much like on the NASCAR side there, it never seemed like you were kind of getting an understanding of it. It seemed like there was kind of this tension between kind of the media side and the I guess the administrative side of it. I don't know if that's any of you guys that are more long-term Formula One fans, but that was kind of the impression I got just from watching this one broadcast here. Again, I don't really watch it week to week, and I watch IndyCar a little more frequently. But Formula One, yeah, usually this is pretty much the only one I check out, unless the championship's close. Of course, last year was certainly can't miss TV there. But I thought that was strange, and again, it's not like I'm familiar after seeing the Senna documentary that of course you could have drivers that excel at the rain. You could have somebody like that in what feels to me like not too distant past. Drivers that would just excel at it, and of course, Alan Prost famously trying to end that race while Senna's catching him because he's just so good at figuring out a way to drive that Tolman through the rain. But then you had other drivers that, of course, had issues with rain and the safety issues of it. Niki Lauda, of course, in his championship bid in '76. I have to kind of cherry pick these things from more popular examples. I'm sure, again, people that are more knowledgeable can bring up other examples. But I was very much persuaded by, again, David Hobbs and Martin Brundle bringing this up, given both of them being pretty outspoken on safety. and being longtime, competitors in the sport, I think that opinion should hold a lot of weight. That Formula One shouldn't be easy. It shouldn't be made easy. And I think, I think we've seen a little bit of that on the NASCAR side too. Anything that makes the sport easier to compete in. Now, again, this being separate from safety, I think if there's common sense restrictions to safety, certainly like the window net issue at Texas is one thing. But if it's just a challenge there, and this is the time that the race starts, and we have rain tires, and you can go out there and compete. I don't think that would have created a situation like what NASCAR had at COTA last year, where they literally couldn't see because of the restrictions of the cars, and you had some really dangerous accidents in that case. I don't think this was the situation that was going to lead to that, given the speed of the track. There were some incidents in practice leading up to it, but again, I think that these are the best drivers in the world, and they should be capable of driving in the wet. I mean, this is what they do. But I understand the other background of it too. I remember watching the Jules Bianchi accident when it happened, and how awful that was. But I think, again, there's other distinctions you can draw from that. I mean, we don't have big runoff areas at Monaco. Again, not a faster track. They're not going to have tractors sitting in the middle of the track or anything like that, too. There's abilities to distinguish. And, of course, most importantly, you have the halo bar, of course. So you have other restrictions that you can look at, too, and say, well, wait a minute, this is a different scenario. It'd be interesting if there's more transparency, but having seen the Senna documentary, I'm guessing that transparency in the FIA is probably even harder to come by today. I certainly got that impression. If the Sky Sports people can't get through that veil, I don't sense that really anybody can, much less like the weekly reporters, or however that whole structure is set up. But it was interesting, and I think every year when I try to watch these, I'm glad they brought Monaco back onto the same day. It's interesting to kind of check up on these other series and just see what the differences are. And that was one thing that really kind of stood out to me on that one. So, but generally, yeah, I thought once the race started, I thought it was very, very compelling. I thought it was great to see a battle at the end where people were within sight of each other. Most Formula One races I see, it seems like it's the battle into the first turn, and then whoever is leading at that point, it's just over. The person's going to lead green to checkers. In this case here, I mean, you had a situation where, much like I think the Road America race in the Xfinity series that Brendan Gaughan won a few years ago, you start on a damp track, it gets drier and drier, and you get the fastest lap switches from one driver to the next, and who's going to switch to which tire. That made it absolutely exciting. I remember Kevin O'Connell being a factor in that Xfinity race years ago, and we had a situation like that where you had cars very close together, and it just came down to really small decisions at the end. I think it's one of the best F1 races I've watched in recent years. So I think all in all, yeah, there was some scary incidents there. It's still, all three are very dangerous sports. I think you can look at, there were certainly examples in each one of these. Chris Buescher's accident in the 600. A lot of the incidents off turn 2. I think Callum Ilot's accident was very shocking when he hit both walls there, but glad to see him get out. And then Mick Schumacher's accident in the F1 race there too. I thought, we saw a lot of those challenges, but we saw a lot of good competition there, and I think that hopefully more people were checking it out. I know that Formula One's been getting so much attention with how much focus they've been receiving through the Netflix series and all that. Indy getting full capacity again after the last couple of years. I mean, that must be just. I mean, there must be just on cloud nine today, and then to have just a tremendous race there too. I think that's another good thing about having that race end under green there as well. It would have been great to not have an accident at all, but clearly turn 2 was being treacherous, and that accident could have easily happened on the last lap of the race, as it could have, 5 or 6 laps from the finish there too. And the 600, greatest 600 I've seen in quite a while. I think there's a lot you could say about any one of these or all these races together, and I think that's another big thing to really draw from it there too. So yeah, I think that's kind of a different one there at the same point. Oh, Schifferber, I'm seeing your comment there about MotoGP. I should check them out. I think they come out to the Laguna Seca out here in my direction there too, I believe. But that seems like a different situation. So Yeah, I hear it's really exciting. So I haven't followed motorcycle racing as much, but those guys are, again, I tend to view IndyCar drivers as like the ultimate daredevils out there, but maybe the motorcycle guys are like right up there. So that would be kind of another one too. Yeah, you expect to race in the rain there, RD Fox 76. Yeah, see, there you go. I mean, that, I don't know why it was such a situation there at the same time there, too. But yeah, I thought it was a decent race. I mean, I've seen enough races at Monaco over the last few years that, yeah, it seems like it's just going to be dominated by somebody. And yeah, it's a bunch of, it's like an obstacle course they kind of weave their way through. But I don't know. I think it was. I thought it was decent. I think that's about as good as you're going to get from a race here, unless it's just complete chaos, which we almost seem to have from the start of this one here too. But that's kind of interesting at the same time. So I want to get into the Xfinity and the Truck Series races too. We kind of hopped around here to kind of talk more about the other events today. If you guys have any other questions or anything else I haven't talked about here from these races, definitely mention in the comments, and we'll jump into that as well. Let's move the clock all the way back to Friday here and the Truck Series race to start off. Mentioning Ryan Preece at the earlier part here for the 600. Of course, he was the last place finisher of the Cup Series race today. I'm sure one person that was probably cracking a smile a bit after that was Carson Hocevar. It's, of course, been well known now at this point. There was that incident between Hocevar and Preece at the end of the Truck Series race. Preece kicking off a weekend where he was in 3 of the 4 major events at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, excluding just the ARCA race. But looked like it was going to come down to the 2 of them at the end of the race. Very exciting to see. You had Hocevar had a 6-second lead coming down to the very end of the event. Looked like he was finally going to punch his ticket and score his first win. And I was typing towards the end of this one and saying, like, I remember in 2002, Johnny Benson had a dogged race against Kurt Busch, going for what was Benson trying to get his first Cup win in 2002. I didn't really talk about this in Johnny and the Fast White Car, but it was definitely another big part of the story. At Martinsville, Benson had many opportunities where he could have just moved Busch out of the way and got his first win, but he didn't, and he ultimately finished second that day, and Busch scored the win. And even though the season was wrapping up, and there was no indication that the team was going to be exactly the same in 2003, and who knew there's going to be a new version of the Pontiac Grand Prix coming in. Who knew if the team was going to be as competitive? Benson and himself just coming off some injuries earlier in the year and trying to finish the year strong. He didn't do it. He didn't move him out of the way. And then ultimately, a couple weeks later, he won at Rockingham. And as you saw in the clip in that video, they actually had a good side-by-side battle. He raced him clean, which Mark certainly appreciated. And Benson scored his first win, and it turned out to be his only win in the Cup Series. And I was kind of thinking about this towards the end of the race because, of course, Hocevar is a protege of Benson, having worked with him, which I think is another reason that, of course, with Benson's success in the Truck Series, which did come after his Cup Series career concluded, I was thinking, well, I wonder if that same lesson passed on. But I started kind of typing that, and I ended up tweeting it, a moment too soon there. And, of course, on the back straightaway, Hocevar gets to this incident with Preece. He's trying to throw the block to keep Preece from advancing. It's your first win. And I think in this situation here, especially where he had a 6-second lead and then some accident happens further back in the pack. I think Tyler Ankrum was in it, and Jesse Little. You had a situation where, suddenly that lead is gone, and you got a green, white, checker finish. Kind of, again, the situation that you had with the IndyCar race there, too. I think, perfect in a real world, it would be great if you could still have a green, white, checkered finish, but, somebody that's up there is still going to be able to win. But again, the green, white, checker finish is just going to toss everything up into the air. And I know Ben Schneider, who writes for the site, is very strong opinions on this in one way or the other. But again, it could give or it could take away. It could create a situation that would give you the same result anyway, just under green, or it can create a situation that is going to be entirely different, and the guy that was going to win is going to be, way back in the pack. And we saw both of those kind of this weekend. We saw Marcus Ericsson able to still hold on and get the same win that he would have had, more than likely, even if the caution didn't come out. I know that, he had a big enough lead over Pato O'Ward that it seemed like that wasn't going to change. And in the Truck Series race, yeah, it seemed like Hocevar had a big enough lead over everyone that nobody was going to be able to do something there. But in both cases, we had a restart, And in this particular case, Prix had fresher tires, came to his outside, had position, and Hocevar moved up. And yeah, they made contact. He moved up into him to try to throw the block. He drove it in way deep into turns 3 and 4 to try to defend his position. And unfortunately, just like we saw with Chase Briscoe tonight in the 600, truck just broke loose, slid right up into him, and put them both out of the event. And it's unfortunate. And I don't blame either of them for being as utterly crestfallen and frustrated as they were afterwards. I thought one of the other great things we saw out of this weekend was the real raw emotion from a lot of these drivers and teams. I think that's something that people have been looking for a long time, and that NASCAR has come down way too hard on when these drivers say what they want to say, or they're not going to be happy about things 100% of the time. I've only watched bits of Denny Hamlin's interview on the Dale Jr. download, but I kind of get the sense that, yeah, he's kind of just taking the restrictor plate off and just kind of saying what he's going to say. And the argument was made, is he the new mayor of the garage area? I would say so. I think he's become that outspoken and maybe kind of bringing up issues that maybe should be re-examined in the sport. And kind of taking that role that Jeff Burton had back in his Roush racing days. So, who knows what's happening at that end. Yeah, I thought in the end of the race, I'm partial to Hocevar because I love seeing first-time winners, and I think it'd be great for him to get up there. But it wasn't too long ago that Ryan Preece was in that situation. And, of course, he's now in this situation as a reserve driver where he's got Stewart-Haas equipment or Stewart-Haas backing, and he's in this line where he's kind of got this opportunity to perhaps make his way into a Stewart-Haas ride further down the line if something opens up, and maybe find himself in the very same situation that Alex Bowman had at Hendrick. And I know that's in the back of his mind. Right from the start of this year, he was trying to get the best run he could out of that Rick Ware car back at the Busch Light Clash at a track that very much reminded him instantly of Bowman Gray Stadium, running those modifieds. But, you just have a situation where who wants it more? And in that case, I think both of them wanted it just as much. And how many times do we see it where guys just, they get in a situation like that and they just take each other out? And that was kind of the situation that we literally had there. Ross Chastain ends up pulling off the win. I think Chastain, at this point, and I have something else I'm kind of working on with this here. I think at this point, him being in the Truck Series is kind of coming off a little ridiculous because now he's contending for what feels like every single Cup Series race. But I don't think that was anticipated when he signed on to do these truck races earlier this year. I think that came up more as a surprise. But I think coming into next year, probably revisit, how appropriate it is to kind of stay in the lower series. I'll keep that for debate for another day because I know I've already made that enough of the last couple of these shows. But that would be another one to kind of look at there too. But Ross was excited. Again, terrible camera work. I was getting a lot of questions about this after the race was over with when Chastain smashed the watermelon. And for no reason, right when he's about to lift it up, they cut away and show the crowd and then cut right back to him again, right an instant after he's already smashed it on the ground. And it's like, what is the absolute point of this? Again, and I know I got a lot of comments on social media here about like, oh, you're going to do another episode of this? I don't think there's more I need to say. I really don't at this point. I think everything else that we're seeing, they're just more examples of what I've already pointed out in that video. And that ended up being quite the chore to kind of put that one together. And I don't think anybody really wants to see too many more of those. That might change further down the line. If things really flip off the rails, that might be the time where I would kind of look into doing that again. But yeah, it's just absurd. And then in the Xfinity race, we haven't talked about the Xfinity race yet. A lot of people sent me that video clip of Kevin Harvick during the drivers only broadcast trying to get the cameraman to show the battle between Allgaier and Berry, which consistently through the second half of that race was easily the best part of that race. That was a tremendous battle between those two drivers that are teammates that certainly didn't race like they were. I know I joke about that tagline from my old terrible broadcast videos, but it's true. That was riveting. That stretch towards the end of the race, those last 80 laps, was just magical. I mean, it was an old school race there. Those two just pulled away, had a 15, 18 second lead over everybody else, and they just went at it. And that was incredible to watch. I could watch that all day. That reminds me of the battle that Ross Chastain and Denny Hamlin had at Darlington a while back, or before that, the other Darlington battle between Chase Briscoe and Kyle Busch. Just tremendous racing out there. And again, it makes me really hope that JR Motorsports can get a charter or figure out, or maybe the charter system just collapses and the juniors team could get a Cup Series ride out there and test their mettle against Colleague and the other guys out there. Because I think they could do it. I think they could put it to them. And I think Allgaier could find his way to be in the very same situation that AJ Allmendinger finds himself now, where he's just like a driver reborn and running the very best races of his life. I think that would be another one to kind of look at. Yeah, I thought it was a very exciting race, but very frustrating broadcasting. And I've said it right from the outset. A terrible broadcast can ruin a fantastic race, and people at home will think, "Oh, well, that race was just terrible." I was watching it the whole time and it was boring. And like maybe it's because the camera zoomed in on something else that's happening, and you're just missing this stuff. I think a lot of what we saw this weekend, even on the NASCAR side, from all three of those races. I didn't watch the ARCA race live, but I heard a lot of the crazy stuff about that one. But watching the Cup Series Xfinity trucks, fantastic racing, absolutely fantastic racing. And that's just what we were able to see. I can't imagine what it was like to be at the track and actually see that action live, because it seemed like there was just so much action everywhere there. But again, I think it really drew the focus, especially for the Truck Series and the Xfinity broadcasts, that again, the direction, especially the direction on the Xfinity side. I thought the drivers only broadcast, they did a decent job of playing off each other. I think one thing that was very revealing was that Joey Logano definitely contributes to Adam Alexander laughing way too much in the booth when Adam is like the head play-by-play guy, because Joey was still laughing entirely too much. He was thinking himself like a Kenny Wallace in there. It's easy to forget Kenny Wallace was doing the speed stage thing instead. He wasn't really in the booth that much. Apparently, we're going to get him next week for the Gateway race, which we'll see how that goes. I like Kenny. I got no problem with him. But I think it's going to be a little bit of pandemonium in the booth if you're going to match him against, apparently, I guess he's just going to be as a special guest there because you got Michael Waltrip and you got Clint Boyer already. But I think that's going to be way too much going on. I'm going to have to really test the volume level on the TV there next week for that one, because I think that's going to be a bit of a mess. But I might be wrong. Who knows? But I think other than Logano, the one thing I'll give Logano credit for in the Xfinity race is when he made the joke when Jeffrey Earnhardt's car was stuck. And he said something about him being stuck in the grass. He's like forever in the grass. And Blaney or somebody in the background is just laughing like, why'd you say that? Like, I thought that was hilarious. I'll give him credit for that because that was actually funny. I think when the drivers only broadcast is at its best is when they're kind of making fun almost of the effort of it. I'm a person that takes broadcasting very seriously, and I think it does need to kind of return to its roots. But at the same time, look, I'm not going to pretend like I don't have a sense of humor about it either. I think the drivers only broadcast shows just like, look, there's room for levity in it. There's room for, having a little fun with it there too. I just think that, and I thought frankly, it was more disciplined than an Adam Alexander broadcast or a Vince Welch broadcast. I thought it was easier to listen to. I thought, and I certainly thought they were trying everything they could to actually show what was happening. And if the camera was showing Trevor Bayne down pit road, they're like, hey, wait a minute, look over here. We got Josh Berry and Allgaier. They're not the leaders, but they're going for the lead. They need, if anything else, they needed somebody like that during the Cup race tonight. I think we would have seen way more racing even than we already saw. And with a dwindling amount of cars out there, they really didn't have an excuse to really miss anything at that point in my eyes. But, yeah. Austin Cindric, yeah, I thought he was funny too. That was great. Yeah, he was a hoot. The pit reporters were good. Tyler Reddick was a little awkward, but that's okay. I think that's just kind of his thing. That's kind of the way he is. Yeah. And then I think the thing that's really ridiculous is when you have like Brad Keselowski and the other guys like in the Hollywood Hotel group, and they're just kind of there, like they're not really contributing all that much to it. And I think I kind of get the image of like with Jim Carrey and what was it, Bruce Almighty, when he has like his image of like what a broadcaster should be with the hair standing up, and it's like, oh yes, this is where I need to be. Like that's kind of what it reminded me of. It's like not realizing just like how objectively ridiculous it kind of is. I thought that was just kind of funny. I don't know. It's just maybe it was just me. It just kind of struck me that way. But I think yeah, Logano, Blaney, and Harvick. I thought they did a great job in the booth. I watched it on tape delay on Saturday, but yeah, I thought they did a pretty good job with that. I thought that was entertaining, and again, especially kind of bringing teasing Blaney a bit about the situation with the All Star race, and Blaney still insisting like oh, I got the window net all the way up, and he's saying like, well, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have like yellow gloves, like you can see that it's clearly not up all the way. I mean, it's good to it's good that story hasn't left because I mean I think there are very serious elements to it. But thankfully, of course, he got through that okay. And I think while I still think again there should be something going on behind the scenes to handle it. I think under the circumstances, it was appropriate in that sense. So yeah, I mean, I think there was again a lot of positives to glean from that. And any afternoon where I can watch an Xfinity race and not have to hear Adam Alexander in the background, kind of way too laid back. Because I think that was the thing. It was a little bit of both. Because on the one hand, you had Adam Alexander. You didn't have Adam Alexander kind of dragging it back and kind of doing this angle where it's like, okay, look, he's coming off the corner and he's going to win the stage, and like it's you didn't have that in the background. But I will admit that the drivers just kind of left to their own devices, it was still, again, kind of shooting the breeze and just kind of talking about other stuff with the play-by-play. But I think they were very dependent on what was being shown on the screen. So again, I think that does still fall back to the direction at that point. I don't really blame that as much on the talent because again, they're drivers. They're not professional broadcasters, so they're not going to know all the little ins and outs and everything. Even though people like Harvick and Logano have now done it a good amount of times. I'm still not willing to be that hard on them from a talent perspective there because I think that's part of the charm. They're having fun with it. But I think when it came down to what they were showing, because it seemed like the commercial breaks were even set up in such a way that they were really minimizing time where they would kind of shoot the breeze during a caution flag or something. It seemed like at least the commercial breaks were like long enough to offset that. And when they come back from a commercial, they'd be like, coming right up to an actual restart or, something that was ongoing there. But yeah, I think that Harvick was very right to be kind of frustrated with the direction there. And to the point where he's shouting at somebody. I don't even know who he was talking to. I think he was just trying to, just anybody that was there about like trying to get the camera to, show the battle. And eventually they did. And luckily we didn't miss that towards the end of the race there. Because again, that was easily the best part, certainly of the second half of the race there to see at the same time. So lots to look at there too. But yeah, again, I don't think... It's a trade-off. Now, do I think they should do that every week? No, I don't think so either. I think, again, you need to just have a better play-by-play guy there to tie it all together. But I think once a year, I don't have a problem with them doing the drivers-only thing. I think it's a fun thing. It's just kind of silly. But, again, it shouldn't be the norm. And it shouldn't be... It shouldn't be better than the regular broadcast. That's the most galling part of it. And I think really in this case, it really was. At least in my view, that was kind of what I gleaned from it. I thought it was very enjoyable. I really enjoyed myself watching it. And I did, watch. Now maybe part of that was watching on tape delay and being able to fast forward through the commercials. But I'll still give, I'll give the tie to the runner here and just say that was probably the situation with them. So, yeah, I think that was another one too. I haven't talked so much about the last place battle between the trucks and the Xfinity race. Talk about the hosts of R and Ryan Prix thing again. Love seeing the raw emotion. Hate that neither of them won, and we had a situation like that. But these things do happen. I don't want to really go too far on one side or the other. One other thing that the broadcast screwed up in the Truck Series race was Brennan Poole. His truck was coming at the camera. They had just a static shot entering turn one about 40 laps into the race, and you see like the field coming by. And Brennan Poole is leading this trailing pack of trucks. And all of a sudden, his truck just erupts in smoke. And there's like sparks and stuff coming off it. And then they cut away. And then I'm starting to think, okay, wait, did I just see that? Like the broadcasters didn't react to it. It's like, what's going on? So I switched over to the 46 channel on my scanner. And I'm listening to this. And they're saying, oh, it's locked up. Something's locked up. And they push the truck behind the wall. And ultimately, it turns out they had a drive shaft failure. And I guess what the sparks were is a drive shaft just popping out of the bottom of the thing. And, I guess it rolled somewhere or something and it didn't draw a caution because that was another reason the broadcasters didn't seem to notice. Now, again, I'm not saying they should focus on every little thing. You're always going to miss something. But nothing was presently going on at that point. They could have easily caught that and just said a word about it. It's like, oh, looks like a truck has trouble out there. Like, is that so hard? But I don't know. I guess it is. But unfortunately, Brennan Poole, after qualifying Mike Harmon's car into the Xfinity race, which that team has not been able to do for weeks. You see I'm wearing the 47 shirt here. I thought the American Scroll Company, I know I've mentioned them quite a bit on the social media, but I'm very impressed with the branding here. I like kind of this pattern they did where it's kind of this calligraphy detail. Something very different in the sport. Kind of must be like more what the Tide Ride felt like in the late 80s when you suddenly had different consumer products in the sport. I think we're kind of seeing a few of these other different brands that maybe you wouldn't identify with the sports. Although apparently this company has a very patriotic kind of base to it, which kind of seems more conducive to Mike Harmon's frequent sponsors that he usually has on that team. But I love the patterns. I thought it was really cool to kind of support them and pick this up here. I think it kind of reminds me of kind of the patterns they do on like the back of like a dollar bill or something. But I thought it made a really distinctive paint scheme. I think it was really interesting, and I'm glad they ran it again this week after they didn't qualify at I guess it was Kansas a while back when they first debuted it. And I'm glad they got back out there. Unfortunately, the race didn't go very well, and we'll certainly get into that there too. Actually, I guess we'll get into that right now. On the Xfinity Series side, Brendan Poole actually missed the start of the race. Battery issues, which was a bit of a frequent problem that has plagued the Mike Harmon racing team. When I was at Texas last year, it was a battery that was actually starting to fizz and like spark and stuff, and Harmon had to kick it underneath a pit wagon there in the garage area. This was back when they had the 74 and the 47. 74 was the one that was the garage area with Bailey Curry. Just a freak situation that just left the car stranded on the track. Luckily, they got that out of there before it would fry the wiring or start a fire or something. But they've had so many problems this year trying to qualify for races. The last time before Charlotte, they even qualified for a race. They got in the race at Martinsville, and the car blew a clutch coming to the stripe. Didn't even cross the start-finish line. And, of course, it's an underfunded team. They have a lot of difficulty trying to get good efforts together. I know that effort's been made even more difficult, ironically, with the larger fields out there. Although I think in the aggregate, it's great to see larger entry lists and encouraging even the smaller teams to kind of improve their competitiveness too, which I think is a reason that they've scaled back on the 74 team at Harmon's and focused on the 47. Of course, the testing penalty certainly, I think, contributed to that as well from last year. But they finally qualified for this race. I think Poole is an excellent qualifier. I thought he was very overlooked when he did his rookie season in 2020 in the Cup Series, given his history with the Chip Ganassi team and that Talladega win that got stolen from him at the same time. I think Poole is a great get. I think, unfortunately, he's, still kind of having to work his way back up. Maybe one day he'll be like a Ross Chastain and he'll find his way back in there with a better ride. But in the meantime, he's working with, Tim Veen's team that had that drive shaft problem. And then with Mike Harmon's effort, and as hard as they worked, they had to miss the start of the race. They didn't get to start 19th. They came back out about 10 laps down, had a seal fail on one of their wheels, and had to come back in with a brake issue and ended up still leaving them in the bottom five. But again, these are stories that are interesting to follow there at the same time, because it shows just how hard these teams work. Even if they have no chance at winning, even if their chance of winning has gone out the window in the first few laps, they're going to do the absolute best they can to complete as many laps as they can and to maintain a presence they can, because that's what these teams have to do to market themselves as sponsors. Probably how they got attention to these guys in the first place. And hopefully they stay with them, going forward. So we'll find out what happens. But the last place run was from another underdog that also faced his share of problems. Timmy Hill, with his first last place finish in, I believe, more than a year, or at least a year it's been for him. On the Xfinity Series side, the number 13 car qualified in the 9th spot, and he was actually third highest of the Toyotas to qualify at Charlotte. And then he ultimately actually became the top qualified Dodge of the field because the two in front of him, Trevor Bayne and Brandon Jones, both were sent to the back of the field for unapproved adjustments penalties. And so he was the top Toyota, and he did not drop to the back of the field. He stayed right up there in the leaders, and he stayed about the top 10 for the first few laps. A great run for Carl Long's team. But one thing that was an issue, and is unfortunate, and perhaps is kind of an offshoot of what we've seen with the Cup Series cars and this issue with the tie rod or the suspension failures, is we're seeing catastrophic suspension failures still in the Xfinity and the Truck Series. In the Truck Series side, we saw this with Keith McGee, who had a shock mount break, and it was contributing to the fact that he was running so slow at the beginning. And that's another team that could really use just even a decent run in the next few weeks. Josh Rialm's number 43 team, their second Truck Series team, they had nothing but bad luck the entire month of May. Akinori Ogata had the wreck with the teammate, Josh Rialm. You had the situation there with Jesse Iwuji being flagged off the track for running too slow. Then you had Armani Williams fail to qualify at Texas, and then they get over to Charlotte, and they get Brendan Poole on board, and then they get Keith McGee on board. McGee loses a sponsor days before the race. Rialm still says, look, we signed you on to run this. It's Memorial Day weekend. You got a military history. Let's keep you in the truck and run it out there. And then they get another sponsor, which still backs them up, and then they can run. And then what happens on that? They have a shock mount break, and it drops them out of the race. And they very nearly got last place. They would have if it hadn't been for what happened to Brendan Poole. So you had that whole situation there on that side. But then you look at Timmy Hill's situation, and he had the same situation that happened to McGee. He spun into the outside wall. It didn't seem like, and much like even really Ryan Preece tonight in the Cup Series race, spun into the outside wall, had a bit of damage to his car. Didn't seem like it was going to be a big particular issue, but he slides back down the track. And, it's like, okay, get some fresh tires, get back out there. You don't have the track position that you had, but maybe you can climb your way back in there. Timmy Hill is certainly capable of that. He's done it in the Truck Series with his team. But then you had a situation where he gets back out there and he has a shock mount that broke. The exact same problem that happened to McGee. I don't know if it's just these shock mounts are just like, being more of a problem, if it's the mounts themselves, if it's a manufacturer issue, if it's an installation issue, because these are smaller teams, maybe they don't install them as well, or if it's just the issue of the Charlotte track. Because again, we saw Ryan Preece with the Stewart-Haas-backed Rick Ware entry have that tie rod failure. So we're seeing kind of these different... I'm trying to kind of really, when I look at these last place battles, try to archive them better in my memory and kind of compare one to the next, because I think it kind of reveals some of these trends a little bit in the mechanical issues that you can carry from one race to the next. But regardless, a last place run for Timmy Hill. There's a picture that was posted, I believe, on their Facebook page of Hill and Carl Long looking just down, and there's too many shots of them in that situation. I certainly hope for a turnaround for him. But I thought it was a great showing. I guess Logan Paul was tweeting about it because he and KSM, I believe it is, or behind the Prime hydration sponsorship there. And it was good to see a lot of people were supporting the sponsor too. But unfortunately, a 13 car out of the race, and but not for a lack of effort there. I think that unfortunately, the way a lot of these situations are shown in a broadcast, it really makes it seem like, oh, it's like a start and park. Like, oh, they just spun out, they didn't hit anything, and they parked. It's like, no, that's not what happened. Something actually broke on the car for one reason or another. And whether it caused the spin or it happened afterwards or whatever else, this is what happens. And they could point to it. I don't remember if it was Timmy Hill's or Keith McGee's, but one or the other actually showed the shock mount broken and posted on social media. So they're very transparent about it. And that very much stays in the garage area too on the media side. I think when you go in there, they tend to share a lot more information than a lot of these big teams do. Most often they'll kind of keep you at a distance, even if you got your credential, to be like, nope, you got to stay back. So, that was definitely our situation here. So a heartbreaker for them. Kyle Weatherman too, you got that big wreck, that one point there, trying to get another good run for Jesse Iwuji. I really hope Iwuji just keeps him in that car, because I think the cars are fast. I think that 12th place run at Darlington showed it. Weatherman is a great talent. I've been very impressed with him since he drove for Harman. And again, I don't want to sound too partial to Harman's team, but I really think that they're one of the stories that doesn't get talked about, especially during the pandemic year. I think that we saw that kind of that ascent of them starting to have Mike drive less often, and putting in Weatherman and Curry and developing these two talents. And we've now seen them branch out to other teams. And I think they're drivers that really should be getting some more attention. And, they're not, affiliated with the Harmon team anymore, but they're still out there. And again, it's still been a haven for Brennan Poole to be driving for him too. So, they're the ones looking for as much support as they can. And again, they're not the only ones I would look at the same way. I certainly hope for, again, the best with the Realm effort too, with all the struggles the 43 team has had too. Hopefully this weekend with the Gateway Portland doubleheader, it's going to be very interesting to see how things shake out when you just have Trucks and Cup on Gateway, and then the Xfinity Series, of course, in the Portland Road Course. I think it's going to be a very exciting weekend, and I'll be very interested to see what storylines we get, especially who's going to be entered in these particular cars. Is Harmon's team, excuse me, going to bring in like a road course specialist, or is he going to stick with who they have, or how is all that going to work out? I mean, very interested to find out. So it's going to be that's going to be something to see. Let's see. I should drink something. That's what I should do. I didn't plan on. I'm sorry if I'm rambling a bit tonight, folks, but clearly, one thing I think I can certainly say from this already, and I'm going to just go ahead and keep rambling, I guess, is that we had just a ton of stories from this weekend. And I think even now I haven't really hit on all of them. I got to check my notes too, because I know there were a couple other things as well. But tremendous weekend. I was kind of stacking this up in my mind during the week here and trying to think about, okay, man, the Sunday show is going to be just slammed. And it's already late at night too, because we're kind of in this whole situation too. They had Poole for Coda. Okay, that'd be a good one to see too. So yeah, hopefully they keep with him. I think he's a good driver for sure. Alrighty. Just looking at the results here, Matt Mills got 20th in the JF Electric, the extra BJ McLeod effort there. I think that's really surprising, too. I didn't mention Ryan Prix getting the 5th place run there in his triple header weekend there, so good effort for him. Justin Allgaier bounced off the wall after his battle with Josh Berry, still salvaged a 7th place run, and ended up being the first car lap down. I mean, 6 cars on the lead lap. But again, you don't have to have a lot of cars on the lead lap to have a good race, and I think that was a good example. Xfinity, I mean, I don't know what was my favorite moment between just the Indy 500 in general, or the battle between Barry and Allgaier in the Xfinity race, or the battle between Hocevar and Priest in the truck race, although that was kind of a lot shorter. Just a lot. I mean, if you are, think you're kind of a motorsports fan and you haven't, not one of these races grabbed you for some reason or another, I mean, I would say that, you must be a fan of some other aspect of the sport, because I think if you're a big part of like one of these other aspects of the sport, if you like long green flag runs, we had that. If you like close finishes, we got that. If you like, leaders taking each other out, we've had that. If you like big crashes, we had that. I think, any one of these aspects, you want drama on pit road. We had Kyle Larson's car catch on fire and he still almost won the thing. All I can say, I probably should have titled this one, "Are You Not Entertained?" That probably would have been a more appropriate title. I think that was really, it was outstanding, and I really enjoyed it. And I think I didn't expect to be this awake at 10:41 Pacific, and I'm sure, I know we've had a few people drop off here because I know it's very late, and I don't blame you guys. If you got something you got to do on Monday, obviously a holiday weekend, I appreciate you guys spending a little time with me on this here, but. If you got to go, absolutely don't feel compelled to stay through here. This will definitely be archived on the website here, but we'll certainly keep covering all that too. I do have something for our show and tell segment here tonight, and we'll do some trivia questions to wrap up the show. I'll also be open to any other questions you guys have here at the same time. I do have a couple of bits of information about other projects I'm working on. One thing I am very pleased to say, and I did mention this on Twitter the other day, that I have finally reached out to Stanton Barrett. Stanton got back to me on Friday and said he is interested in an interview. We hope to squeeze it in today between the races, but of course, once the Monaco race got delayed, we weren't able to get that in there. I don't know if I want to bother him on the holiday tomorrow. Probably not, but maybe sometime this week. I hope to get that interview done. What's great about that is the script for the next episode of Rise of the Fillers is pretty much done. I'm still in the process of adding the interview I did with Dave Watson, his team owner. But once I get all that woven into it, I'll be ready to record, ready to edit, and that should be the next video that's on the channel, unless I find something else that ends up being something on the channel, basically. What's also good is, of course, I've had another project that I've been working on, the aforementioned Silly Season 2000 to 2001 video. That ended up being a much larger project. That will probably be the next video after the Stanton Barrett one. And that, of course, is not going to be the last episode of the Field Fillers episode either, series either, because I got other episodes working on beyond that. So things are finally starting to kind of get a little bit of traction, and I'm glad we're getting to that point, because we're just now getting into Sears Point here in a couple weeks, and I think it's going to be a good couple of months here to kind of stay tuned. So those of you who are in the Patreon still, I appreciate you guys sticking around. I know it's very difficult right now, to say the very least. Believe me, man, I'm putting $80 in my gas tank too, and I'm not a fan of it either. But I really do appreciate the support, whatever anybody's able to do. And if you're not able to be in the Patreon, that's A-okay. Just share the videos. That's the best thing you can do to help the channel on that. Just make sure you share the videos with your friends, send them the links, and that helps out tremendously. And that's that too. And I also saw we got the super chats here too. I appreciate that as well. They are absolutely not expected, but they are absolutely appreciated. And thank you for that as well. Beast of Metal, I owe you reading yours before I get too much further down the line here as well. Thank you again, the Judo Joker, for yours again on the Jamie McMurray for full time in the booth. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I absolutely do agree with that as well. I think he's a very good balance for Clint Boyer's kind of typical craziness there too. Beast of Metal, thank you again for your super chat from earlier. Let me grab yours here too. I don't know if you're still in the chat, but definitely still have your response here as well. I think NASCAR miscalculated a lot of things with the physics on the next gen. They probably wish the Carl Edwards Memorial manhole cover was real. It would make their narrative easier to enforce. Well, yeah, certainly, I agree with that. I think that this part of the season is certainly turned into a test session for the next gen car, and I think NASCAR has shied away from that. I think they wanted to make it seem like they understood completely from start to finish what this car was going to do. But I think they would be lying to themselves if they thought that was the case. I think that the reality of it is they're not going to really know what this car is going to do until it gets into competition. And we saw that with the next gen car, or we saw that with the Gen 6 car. We saw that with the car tomorrow. They had certain tests they could run, but then until they got into competition, it was just entirely different. That you just had this, especially with the Gen 6, I think they had like a complete, they just kind of went form over function. They wanted to have the car look cooler, but does it race any different? No, it kind of raced worse, actually. Mike Joy, I think, has been very transparent on that and mentioning how durable this next-gen car is, and that similar incidents with that car would either take the driver out completely or would cut down a tire or something like that, too. So, yeah, and I think, I don't think it was a turf that caused the Chris Buescher accident. I don't think it was a manhole cover. Maybe it was. I don't know. It didn't seem like they were setting that up. It seemed like they just knocked out a divot that was just the right spot. But I think once that wheel folded under the car and you got the whole weight of the car getting under it, I think it just hit it at just the right angle. And at those speeds, it doesn't take much. And we saw that with Harrison Burton in the 500. It just rolled him over. But I'm glad he's okay. And hopefully those aren't the kind of tests we're going to be seeing more of this year. I think something a bit more dormant is going to be probably more the norm. But again, I do definitely appreciate the super chat on that as well. For sure, Beast of Metal. Let me see here. We'll probably get into our section on that as well. Thank goodness for Code Red. Yes, exactly. I'm gonna need some more here too. I'll tell you what. I'm glad the race started a little bit. Is it just me, or did the Monaco Grand Prix start a little later than last time? I think it. I seem to remember getting up more like 6 a.m. Pacific than 7 a.m. Either way, I'm glad. I mean, that made it easier. I admit I was starting to kind of fall asleep a little bit during that, but the rest of the day I've been good. I just been wired since then. So I'll probably end up just crashing out right after the show tonight. But and I can definitely tell some of the viewers have here as well. So, but I do appreciate those of you guys still tuning in. Well, again, we'll do the next segments here just shortly. All right. Yes, Kiwi at the Glen. That is one thing I wanted to talk about. Thank you, Rusty Ralston, for bringing that up. I think that's fantastic. Trackhouse's team. I would caution against like them expanding too much. But maybe that's misguided because they expanded to two cars, and in just a matter of a few races, Ross Chastain is suddenly the hottest property out there. So I guess they have kind of a better idea figuring that out. So good for them. But yeah, running a third entry and bringing international entrants in, I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. First of all, it's another entry out there to fill some of these short fields. Um, I think I'm kind of surprised a lot of these teams aren't entering open cars. We saw this already with Penske Racing when they brought over the Austin Cindric. We saw this with AJ Allmendinger when he won Indianapolis, and the 16 car was just a complete partial effort when they hadn't bought the two charters that they now have this year at the Colleague team. But yeah, I think anything that fills out these fields, and it's not just simply filling the fields. I mean, you're going to have top quality drivers. You're bringing in Kimi Räikkönen from Formula One. He's run some truck races, a while back. It's been quite a few years, but never run in the Cup Series. And now you got this car that has already shown from the Coda race that it really handles these road courses well, like a Trans Am car almost. I know it's just been the one, but I think it's good to show what we've seen so far. And Sears Point will be another test on that direction too. Um, yeah, I think it's great, and I'd love to know who else are going to be driving those cars. I'm sure they'd love to get Lewis Hamilton, or not just people in Formula One, but maybe some of these MotoGP guys or something like that. I think that would be fantastic, but I don't know if we're going to get that or not. But I think one can certainly hope. I think their mission statement is good. I think bringing international drivers in, and I think really bringing outsiders in. I think it's just showing. I think it's showing some reciprocity between them and then IndyCar, having Jimmy Johnson in there and seeing drivers really kind of spread out. We've heard this from people like Jeff Gordon saying that he wants his drivers to kind of get out there and try different things. I think that's good. I think that really shows that NASCAR isn't just some cloistered niche market in the motorsports thing, that it really is part of a larger motorsports community, and maybe within that it'll get a little bit more respect than it's been getting. I think that might be something else. Like Jamie Whincup, yeah, how about that? Let's get some supercar people out here. I mean, that would be great. I'm just getting my notes here too at the same time. Yes. Okay, yeah, I got that. When do safety measures go too far? Is it Formula One Monaco? Yeah, and again, I want to kind of go back to that as well. The thing with the safety measures there with Monaco, I don't want to create some cognitive dissonance between last week's show, of course, where they were getting very casual in the NASCAR booth about not having the window net up on Ryan Blaney's car, because I do still think that's very serious, and they should have done something with that. I think at Monaco, where you literally have all these safety restrictions in place, that you have, again, lower speeds, fantastic, crash protection. You got the Halo bar. You got all this other stuff here. I think it was a bit of an overreaction to not let them run in the rain, even a steady rain. If you could go out there and then it suddenly turns out to be kind of a problem, you could always red flag it at that point. But I think they should have at least tried. I think it's apples and oranges in that sense. And I would still say, much like what David Hobbs was pointing at, it's like, look, these are Formula One drivers. These are the best of the world. They should be capable of at least running in the rain. It's not like these cars can't do it. And if they can't do it, well, then that's another problem they need to look at. So, yeah, I think it's a little bit different there. I was very interested in the response that I got on the tweet that I posted the other day about licensing the rights to smaller teams to a different company. Maybe something like where diecasts are made, maybe a slightly small, like slightly lower quality, not too much further down the line, but like maybe either something that's like a cross promotion with Happy Meal toys, or something with a fast food restaurant. Obviously, Jimmy Spencer and the McDonald's team, or Bill Elliott years later, did promotions like that. But it feels like it's been a very long time since that's happened. I remember Burger King in the mid 90s had pullback cars that had Jeff Gordon's car and Joe Nemechek's, back when Joe Nemechek was sponsored by Burger King. And then you think even further back to the Days of Thunder cars that were made by the companies for the Hardee's restaurants back then. I think those were great. I think something like that should be kind of looked into again. And I think there have been attempts to make kind of cheaper NASCAR merchandise. I don't want to make it seem like it's like of like significantly lower quality, but just like a little bit more accessible. Because I know the diecast prices, especially in stores, are still pretty expensive. Here in California, it's still like $5 or $6 if you get them at like Target or Walmart or something like that. That's not available for everybody. I think if you get something that's maybe half that, maybe a cross promotion with Hot Wheels like they used to have, where you look at some old Hot Wheels designs that had like Darrell Waltrip's car or Davey Allison's way back. Um, they kind of merged those into their line. Even Danica Patrick had cars made off of a much simpler body back then, and so making NASCAR stuff more accessible to people. And I think the secret to that is looking at the smaller teams and marketing it in that way, where you could have smaller teams that aren't always made in diecast, or maybe they did not produce ones because there's not a big enough interest to warrant a large manufacturer of cars in the traditional sense. Finding a way to kind of collect all those together and sell them, license them to a different company. The diecast that I showed in the picture was an old Fun Stuff Pit Road collection where you had three different teams with three different manufacturers and three different drivers. They were just shown and racing each other. And these are teams that are not really the big teams. You had Larry Hendrick's team with Greg Sachs. You had Radius Motorsports with Ted Musgrave. And you had Roush Racing, but not mainstream Roush. You had like the expansion car that had Wally Dallenbach in it. And these are cars that maybe, somebody wouldn't buy individually because maybe they don't have as many fans or not many people know who they are. I think that'd be a great opportunity for, say if you had, somebody was suggesting this in the discussion there, do it for the open teams. Like if you want to get a New York Racing Team car or a Money Team car or something like that. I think that'd be great. Or a Team Hesburg one, something like that. I think that'd be a great effort there. And then, maybe they'll be produced quicker or something like that. Yeah, Micro Machines, RD Fox 76, exactly, something like that. I think that would be great. Just something else that could kind of work with that. That'd be cool. I mean, I was kind of picturing something more that was still 64 scale, so kid at home could still play around with it with like other more mainstream releases. I think we don't want to go kind of a direction of like a Mega Bloks direction or something like where okay, it's compatible with like other building sets, but it's you can still kind of tell the difference. If you kind of narrow that as much as possible, I think that would kind of encourage sales better on that. At least that's my thinking. I mean, I'm thinking something more that direction. But yeah, just kind of doing something like that. I think that'd be kind of fun. Maybe something with, I think the blind bag things that they do is kind of fun. The NASCAR Authentics line did that a few years ago with more of the mainstream ones. The 187 scale diecast, I think that was really cool. Yeah, I think that's something else that they should really look at. And also maybe a way to promote like Xfinity or Truck Series drivers and a lot of the up and comers there. I mean, there's so many different paint schemes that are run now. And I think it's just going to waste. And I know you got people that are already making custom diecasts, so there's an interest out there. There are some people that would buy them. I think it's something to look at. I'd love to be able to pitch that to somebody, but I can't think of who the heck else that would be. So I really appreciate a lot of the interest out there, and who knows, maybe something turns out from that. I don't know what that would be, but that would be pretty hip. So yeah, I don't know. Let's see here. Yeah, 87 scale, that would be another one too. Do. Alrighty. Yeah, 187 scale, no interior. Yeah, you got like things like that. 1024 scale. Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but that would be a different one to look at too. So I'll tell you what, here, let's go ahead and go into the trivia section here. I don't think, do we have a call on the inspection? I know we're kind of well past that point here. Da, 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 da. Let me see what we got here. Is the hopefully the audio is still good here. This is what I got. Well, actually, I'll only do one thing at a time here. Oh, here we go. Tech Complete. This 3 minutes ago, we do have a call here. Bob Pockris posted 3 minutes ago. Tech Complete, no issues. Hamlin the winner. Harvick, Larson, Reddick, and Bell cars to R&D. So no issues there. So we are going to have an article on Ryan Prix. I have most of that done, so hopefully it won't be too much later after the show tonight. You can check that out. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Alrighty. So we got that one. Let me get through here. Okay, so I'm going to. Oh yeah, yeah. Here's what I got here. Again, big thanks to those of you supporters out here. I want to. When I can, I like to try to put stuff back into the show here. I hope I'm seeing the audio levels on here. I'm very very curious to listen to this after the show tonight because this is actually the first time I've really. I did another podcast earlier this week. I actually did too. But this is the first one I've actually produced on my channel with this audio setup. And I'm very encouraged to see how this sounds. I really want to make sure it sounds better here. But here's what I did different here. I'll bring the camera down. We'll kind of do a little setup here. So yeah, I got one of these bad boys here. This Wave XLR deal. And I got that set up here. So that's what's hopefully improving the audio quality here a little bit. And I got the microphone set up just off screen here. So hopefully, and that's from that distance, so it's able to pick up the voice pretty good. So I got it cranked up pretty good to try to get it working here a bit better. But I had a different setup on this before that it pretty much came with the microphone, but it just didn't quite really do the deal. And I know it was pretty quiet. So hopefully, I'll be very curious how this sounds after the show's over with. But hopefully, that's going to improve things going forward here a little bit for you guys. So we'll keep that going. So again, big thanks to those of you in the Patreon and everybody on here because, again, that really allows me to put more onto the show here and make it the best we can going forward here at the same time. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and go into our trivia section. I'll do our show and tell part here as everybody picks their categories. I may step aside here for just a moment here too. So let's go ahead and get into this here first, All right, here we go. So once again, for those of you who may be new to the show here, we got our late 90s Tiger Electronics deal. Our categories of trivia questions are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are our categories here. So once again, NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. And that will be our next one here in just a little bit. The video game angle on that. Yeah, I mean, I'm no expert in that, Beast of Metal. I mean, but it's a good point. I mean, it may just be that hasn't happened because they haven't really looked at which side they want to do here. So we'll see what's going on with that. Alrighty. So as these come in here. I didn't talk about Busher. I think I have touched on that one there too. I mentioned it a couple times there. Yeah, I think again the Chris Buescher situation there. It looks like we had a situation with the the wheel assembly coming apart. I think it just landed at just the right angle that caused him to flip over. I do think it does warrant more discussion about fixing this this toe end issue or the tie rod issue and securing up that part of the body. I think that it's entirely too fragile compared to the rest of the car. And maybe NASCAR didn't realize that. I think as Beast of Metal brought up earlier, I think they weren't aware of the physics involved. I tend to agree with that. But that would be another one, too. Death Killer, good question. What's the longest script in terms of page length you've ever written? I'll tell you this. It's the next one I'm going to do after the Field Fillers one. It's massive. It's going to be, I think it's going to have to be a multi-part thing. This thing it started off as just being a video on the 2000 to 2001 silly season, and I had some good research on it. It turned out to be much longer, and I started working on that, I think, early April. I finished the rough draft earlier, like midway through this month. That is going to be the longest one. Other than that, the other longest one would be 3 before February, for sure. That was the longest one up to this point. This other one, I anticipate, I haven't gone through another top-down. I want to kind of start at the beginning again and kind of smooth out the details a bit more. But I think even after that, it's probably still going to be the longest one. So there's your answer on that one. Switch your vote to teams. Okay, got a few for teams here. All right. Okay, here we go. So we got a couple here for teams. In terms of numbers of pages, let's see. I didn't think I wrote down pages. Let me see. It is. Let's find out. This doesn't show up on screen, does it? No, it doesn't show up on screen. I haven't figured that out. I got to figure that out eventually. Get that part of it too. It's 39,381 words. No, not pages. That would be entirely too long. 39,381 words. That is only about, if it were 10,000 words more, it would be a book, pretty much. But it's not designed to be a book. It's designed to have video cues in it. So that's gonna be pretty long. Beast of Metal, thank you. Yeah, 5 for teams, 1 for wild card. Looks like we'll do teams here for that one. So we'll jump into that in just a sec here. Let me see here. Pull this up. No, not that one. I need. We'll find that out there. It is. There it is. It is 65 pages. 65 pages. And it's now 39,944 words. I had a couple other edits. Yeah, so that one's going to take a while. So, yeah, it's been, but luckily, yeah, I want to make sure I got something else that was in the works while, because I know the Barrett one's been taking forever to get done. I'm anxious to get it done. I want it done and out of the way and set up because I'm really anxious to get that one out there for you guys to see. But I want to make sure it's done right because I think when you're talking about a guy that's a stunt man and a race car driver, you got to talk to the guy himself. You can't leave that out. I already don't like that I couldn't talk to Larry Foyt or Herbie Sadler for those other episodes, but this one I think will be there. Yeah, so that was going to be long, and I don't think it's going to be one part. I think one part might be, I think people's eyes will glaze over at that point, so I'm probably going to divide that into other parts, but you'll see pretty clearly why that's the case. I have a trailer already made for it. I don't want to post it yet because I don't want to post it until I get closer to actually having it done, because I think otherwise it was going to be the same situation I am with the Stanton Barrett one. So we'll get that going there too. Oh, yes, I was going to do show and tell. Let me do that, and then we'll do some teams questions here. I want to give a particular shout out to Sebastian LaForge, also known as Wookie Drives TV, Wookie Atomo on Twitter. Does some great videos of different classic cars, kind of in the regular car review style. And back when he worked with Carl Long, I understand he works with other teams now. He did some features on some of the other cars that were in Carl Long's stables. He's recently put some items up on eBay, and I didn't mind supporting them here, so I picked up something here a while back, and I want to kind of show this here, but I want to give, first of all, a big thanks to him on that, because he kept this in wonderful shape here. So let me get this out for you guys. And so this is, again, another one of the paint schemes that I have certainly been a fan of over the years. And I'm very much pleased with how this was presented. Let me get that out. Come on. Come on. And not so much pleased with how it comes out of the box. There it goes. Okay. Alrighty. And so this may look familiar from certainly those of you who've seen some of the other videos on the channel. How about some Buckshot Jones from 2001 right here? Very pleased with how this one came out. The 2001 version with the sparkle branding there. The brawny branding was on the car when Jerry Nadeau's rear end failed there in 2002. But this is the 2001 version. Also, the other difference, 2002 had the General Georgia Pacific logo kind of straightened out on the hood. In 2001, they kind of did it this kind of interesting angle on the front of it there, so you had kind of a different look to it. I have said quite often that some of the favorite paint schemes I've liked over the years were ones that used the color white as an accent. And I still believe that. There's a lot of them. I mean, the American Scroll one with the 47 is kind of one of the exceptions. That's kind of got a more muted look to it. But this is one of the top ones. Even before Jerry drove it, when this hit the track for the first time in 2001, I thought it was just one of the. I think it was my favorite of the Dodges. I thought it really looked good. Yep, king of the ball, Roy Buckshot Jones, exactly. So kind of covering that there too. Yeah, very interesting. Love that they did the throwback earlier this year with Joe Graff Jr. It was again more referencing the Bush Series equivalent when it ran still the number 00 there from his times with his family's team. But there's an interesting story behind this car. That's coming up in that big monster of a script that's coming up here too. So another part to kind of look forward to on that. I do have more information on this particular team here too, and that'll be coming up as well. But yeah, it's got great details here. It's got the rear deck lid that pops up. It's got the open hood on this. If I can get that popped open there as well. But yeah, really nice. Even for 2001, still has the roof flaps that pop up on it there and everything. But yeah, Sebastian did a wonderful job keeping it on hand. I'm gonna have to find a good spot for it here at Last Car headquarters coming up here because this is definitely a scheme that been a huge fan of here over the years. And I didn't know they made it in 24th, actually. I've only seen it in the Hot Wheels versions before from a while back. Yeah, the Cheez-Its paint scheme. That's another good one, too. I think Larry Pearson drove that one for a while. But yeah, so there we go. That's one to show for tonight on this one. Whoop, let me make sure to put it the right way here. And we'll get into some teams questions to wrap up the evening here. So, alrighty. We set that aside over there. So yes, and yeah, if you're interested in some kind of interesting or kind of crazy stuff in his eBay store, definitely look up his page. I gotta find the right one. Give him the plug here on the show here for you guys. Let me see, where is it? I think he was under. Oh, this one. And where'd it go? Where'd it go? That's not K-State. I think it's under. I think it's still under Wookiee on this one. Yeah, I believe that's the case. History. Gosh, it shouldn't be this hard to find the dang thing. Okay, I believe it is still under Wookiee TV or on that one there as well. But yeah, definitely check out that. He's also active on Twitter, and I believe it's linked on his Twitter page there as well, under Wookiee Drives or Wookiee Otomo there. But yeah, he has very interesting stuff on there. So if you're interested in some stuff, yeah, the range of kind of obscure teams and so forth, yeah, he's got a really interesting selection. I was happy to support him there on that there as well. So let's do some teams question here to wrap up for the show for this evening. Our first question under the teams category: what former NASCAR Winston Cup driver and owner received a presidential pardon? I'll read that first question again. What former NASCAR Winston Cup driver and owner received a presidential pardon? Yeah, Wookiee. I think it just is under that. Yeah, Death Killer. I believe that's the case. But yeah, he had some interesting stuff there too, so definitely check that out. And yes, Sean Parks, thank you for reminding us there of the reason for the season there. Absolutely, it's hard to find the right adjective to describe Memorial Day. Of course, I mean it's like you would say, very happy Memorial Day on one side, that it's a time to spend time with family and so forth. But of course, at the same time, a very solemn holiday, remembering the sacrifices that others have made in the defense of the country in one form or the other. And I think that there were some very profound words mentioned in all the broadcasts, but I think especially the NASCAR broadcast on the subject. I think the reciting of the Bixby letter, I think, nailed it any better than anybody else can. I think Abraham Lincoln, despite being, on top of being one of the greatest presidents, being one of the greatest rhetoricians as well. And I thought it was very well done when they brought that up there, and I think that does that well. So, however you recognize, whatever it is for you on the weekend, I think it's a little bit of both for most people. Whether it's a happy or simply solemn time to reflect as well. Certainly wish that to all of you as well, and sharing that at the same time too. So, absolutely. Let's see. Again, what former NASCAR Winston Cup driver and owner received a presidential pardon? Is the aspect here. We got answers for Junior Johnson. Okay, Junior Johnson's the only answer I'm seeing so far, so here we go. The answer is indeed Junior Johnson. I thought I was going to go about Rick Hendrick and be a tricky question because he drove very briefly, and then, of course, he was a team owner. But yeah, I went with Junior Johnson being the answer. All right, now let's see. Alrighty. Ooh, here we go. Here's a good question. Here's a bit of a paint scheme question, kind of following up with the buckshot discussion. Here we go. What were the primary two colors on Terry Labonte's number 5 monster car? What were the primary two colors on Terry Labonte's number 5 monster car? Yeah, don't look it up. Don't look it up. I know if you Google it, it'll probably show it right away. But see if you can remember. Just dig through the archives there and think about that one. The Radio 1456, the longest video that is yet to be uploaded, also would be the next script planned after the Field Fillers episode. So, yeah, that'd be another one. Alrighty. Green and black, black and green. Figured it had to be a rum runner. Yeah, it makes sense. Black and orange. Okay, here we go. What were the primary two colors on Terry Labonte's number 5 monster car? Is the question. All right, here's the answer. The answer is purple and green. Purple and green. Oh, it actually came into focus there. Purple and green is the correct answer. Blue and green, you came very close. The Range of 1456, you might be as colorblind as I am because blue and purple are ones I always have trouble with. Actually, I had trouble with it when I made this background graphic right here. I think I had blue originally, and this still kind of looks kind of blue-ish, but it's got more red in it. So, as far as I can tell, it's probably just a heavily saturated version of the FedEx colors. Hamlin now, again, officially the winner of the race tonight. The announcement just a little bit earlier here from Tech Inspection. Next question. Who owned the car that won the final Daytona Beach race in 1958? Yeah, purple. Can you believe it? Yeah. Who owned the car that won the final Daytona Beach race in 1958? Yeah, not Monster Energy. You're a little bit before a time. This thing's still late 90s, so I don't think Monster Energy even existed. I think it was still, wasn't it Hanson's Energy back then? It was still like Hanson Soda or something. Like, it just had a completely unmarketable name. But yeah. Who owned the car that won the final Daytona Beach race in 1958? I think, let me see here. Where is it? Okay, no, not that one. Oh, I think it's this one. Hang on. This is a okay. Here we go. This is a render. For those of you curious about the monster car they're referring to, this is a render of a updated version of it. Oh, okay, it's got the original here too. So I'll post this in chat so you can check this out. This is the. Oh, hang on. I gotta make sure. Stupid thing is not logged into the discussion here. Hold up. Got the original here too. Alrighty. There we go. Yeah, that one there has a picture of the monster car that it's referring to. So yeah, not Monster Energy, but more like a monster theme. This is referring to the earlier question, of course, on Terry Labonte's car. And again, for the other question here that people haven't caught up on here yet, who owned the car that won the final Daytona Beach race in 1958 is the question we are currently on. Smokey Yunick, Lee Petty, Antti Ranta, Stefano Domenicali, Trevor Zagris, Carl Kiekhofer. Okay, Holman Moody. We got good guesses. We got interesting guesses. We got all the guesses. Here we go. That's a lot of purple. Yes, I would agree. Yeah, that's the purple and green one they're looking at. The answer is indeed Smokey Yunick. He owned the car that won the last Daytona Beach race in 1958. I believe Paul Goldsmith, if I remember correctly, drove that. So there you go. Alrighty. Okay. So we're going to do just one more question tonight because it's already pretty late. We're already past the 2 hour mark and it's 11 p.m. Pacific. So I appreciate you guys tuning in here for Memorial Day, but I'm not going to keep you guys much longer here. We're going to do one more question here to wrap up for the evening, and then we'll go from there. Last question for the evening. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This one's for you guys here. Who was the first to win an official race on a NASCAR track driving a Chevy? Yeah, purple almost looks dark blue. Yeah, it's hard to tell from that, but yeah, the original picture is a little blurry. Who was the first to win an official race on a NASCAR track driving a Chevy? Don't look it up. Try to guess that there. There you go. Good thing it's a day race next week. Absolutely, yeah. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. We actually had a good amount of people at the start of this, but I'm sure people were really excited about everything from today. And I do appreciate them staying around here for some of the show here. But those of you, I'm sure, are going to be falling asleep here pretty soon, and that I will certainly be among you. There you go. I'm gonna be out. All right, here we go. Who was the first to win an official race on a NASCAR track driving a Chevy? Is the question. Give you guys a little bit more time here on that one. Jeter Johnson, Funny Flock, Curtis Turner, Herb Thomas, Red Byron. So there you go. Yeah, next few weeks. I mean, the Gateway Show. Yeah, we'll do that after the Sunday race and the Sears Point one. Since I'm gonna be doing the trackside coverage, it most likely won't be that afternoon because I'll still be traveling back from the track. So we'll probably end up doing that on Monday, just to kind of wrap that up. And then after that, I guess Nashville and the NBC portion of the schedule will return to our regular after the Cup Series schedule because the next trackside coverage I plan on after Sears Point is going to be Vegas in October. So we got a bit of a gap there, and we'll still be doing the regular shows here on the regular times in the meantime. So got a lot coming up here. I got plenty that's going to be filled in that time, I'll tell you that much. So that's certainly going to be the case. Yeah, it does look more blue than purple, that picture, but hard to tell. All right, here we go. Last question for the evening. Who was the first to win an official race on a NASCAR track driving a Chevy? And the answer is Herb Thomas. A few of you got that one. Herb Thomas is indeed the correct answer. Alrighty. And a lot of you got that one there. RD Fox 76, I think you were the first one on that one. Maserati 9 right afterwards. Jocko Flacco, I like that. There you go. Fireball Roberts. Yeah. Mitsuhira Misawa? There you go. Yeah. Is Sears Point a good facility? Yes. And actually, they're doing some really exciting development at the track there, too. And I have one of the interviews I actually had this week. Our good buddy Kyle Foster. Kyle, I don't know if you were in the show here tonight, but he arranged an interview with her. And so we actually had a great podcast on, I believe it was this past Tuesday, where it was myself and Kyle and Jill Gregory, who's the new VP over at the Sonoma Raceway. And we had some great discussion there on what they're working on, what they have plans for the upcoming weekend. That's going to be posted, I believe, this week because we're, of course, getting very close to the Sears Point week. I think you should have that ready. I'll be posting that on my social media so you guys can check that out as well. I think it was a very good discussion. And I had another podcast with Ben Schneider and his friend Kobe on their podcast on Thursday. And I don't know when that's going to be released, but we also had a good one on that. So a lot more content. If you're interested in more podcast content, we got that coming out soon too. And we'll have the links shared for you guys there on as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you had a wonderful day of racing here on Memorial Day weekend. It's always an exciting time of the year, and I love being able to share it with you guys here and have some discussion about the races. I think, again, overall positive experience. Still things that can be worked on, but that will all come in due time. Just very happy that it was a weekend of safe racing and something that we can build on from there. So in the meantime, the website is lastcar.info. Patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock is the Patreon. My Twitter feed is @LastCarOnBrock. Our next show is going to be after the Gateway and Portland weekend this next week. This will be after the conclusion of Sunday afternoon's Cup race in Gateway. Will be when our next show is. It will be about 15 minutes or so after the conclusion of the race. So if you enjoy this one, give it a like and get ready to tune in for our next show. And in the meantime, you guys have a wonderful holiday and a safe week, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for your support.